I'm very pleased to introduce our poet tonight. And in a way, I want to say welcome to Milwaukie. So this is David's first time in downtown Milwaukie. And I know I have heard that other people say that. So we are very glad that the Pond House is here. This was a inspired purchase by the city of Milwaukie when it came on the market 5.5 years ago for them to do this with the location here on the pond and just adjacent to the Leading Library. David has 6 collections of poems, The Jerusalem of Grass, 2 limited editions of long poems, The Kingdom at Hand and The Chronicles of the Withering State, Departing by a Broken Gate, and The Cartographer's Melancholy, which won the Spokane Prize and was a finalist for the Oregon Book Award. His latest collection of poems is What New, Old Knife? So there are copies of those here, and you can get more information about that on the website, which I included in the invitation. He's also published a collection of cultural and environmental essays about the rural Northwest, Troubled Intimacies. His poems and essays appear regularly in literary magazines, and there's a whole list of his inclusions in various magazines. And along with his wife, Jody Varon, he edits Basalt, a journal of fine literary arts. He's lived in LeGrand since 1988, where he teaches creative writing and literature at Eastern Oregon University. I've also learned too, in getting to know David a little bit, he is a great traveler. So would you join me in welcoming our poet tonight, David Axelrod.
Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Paul Ann, for telling me that I should write to Tom and to the Poetry Committee. Thank you to the Poetry Committee, too, for inviting me. That'll be there at Christmas next year. And thank you all for coming out. It's a whole room full of people showed up to hear these poems. And I have my wrong glasses on, so I'll have to persevere, take them off and hold the book up to my nose. A couple weeks ago, this is a long introduction. A couple weeks ago, we had a young couple over to dinner. They brought their young daughter, Daria, who must be 3.5. And we ate dinner, we drank wine, they went home. Last week, I gave a reading in a kitchenware store. And I read all poems about kitchenware and cooking and eating, sometimes repulsive food. And Daria's mother was there, bought a copy of the book, took it home, putting Daria to bed and said, "Let me put you to sleep." And he read her some poems. Well, a few nights later, Daria says to her, "I want to hear some plums." And I was like, "What?" "No, I want to hear some plums." And her mother's like, "Oh, my kid's crazy, he's already showing signs of schizophrenia." And she says, no, that man at whose house where we threw food on the wall. So I thought that maybe tonight I would dedicate this reading to Daria, because I thought we could listen to some plums, and then there is food, and someone is actually at this moment eating it, and what doesn't fall on the floor we can throw at the walls. I thought I would start by doing something I wouldn't typically do, which is say the epigraphs to this book. And I only do that because they're fictional epigraphs. I made them up. And they pretty much are the poles of the book, as it were. And the first one is by so-called Gaon of Pubbelbrov. It's a prayer he has that he says to the people of Pubbelbrov. Blessed art thou, the Lord our God, who commands us construct the luminous from such obdurate materials as were provisioned. O hear, ye people of Pubbelbrov, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and we are nothing more than ephemera drifted into gutters, the soggy debris discarded by others. Praised be thou, ruler of the universe, who gathers us together, glues us like layers of handbills plastered to lampposts, our brains aglow with affirmative light. And then there's Uta Botnitsky, who, and if you've seen the little video we made for the book, one of my colleagues, Barb Schultz, does a very fine imitation of Uta, if Uta had in fact existed. She has this to say: one day we will learn in the nature of things to live again as human beings. But in the meantime, we enacted the entire alternative plan, a lonely, contemptible mission of exile, an insubstantiation of self, a fantasy of despised but principled retreat. This first poem is called Song of the Magic Head. I have written 2 poems about decapitation. And the second one actually appeared in the book previous to this one, but so this is actually the first time I thought of writing about getting one's head chopped off. Now that I think of it, there are 3 poems of decapitation. There's one in each of these books, the last 3 books, but it goes like this: The Song of the Magic Head. The colonel's boot scuffed across the cottage floor. He placed a hat box on the table and said, "Your son's head." He bowed, turned on his heels, left through the brightness of the open door, whistling a tune popular that year in dance halls. Inside the box, something so dear to me, its loveliness broke all my ribs. My son's soft, thick hair, his eyes dull as milky quartz. I understood I was to blame for this. We had agitated in the square, scattered down side streets when shop windows shattered behind us, and we heard hooves sparking on cobbles, the shink of swords being drawn from scabbards. Later, my son failed to return home. After such disgrace, how would I go on living? I took out poultry shears and began removing my head, cutting through the soft skin below my chin, through the esophagus, and then around the base of the skull. When at last it popped free of the spinal cord, I tossed it on the floor, a heavy, useless thing. And then I reached inside the box and replaced my head with my son's, which fit snugly on the stump of my neck. Then I fell into a deep sleep and dreamed of exile entering my lungs like a knife, the stench of soldiers at roadblocks, God's vigilant silence, my teeth a knot of maggots inside my mouth. My magic head began laughing, an uncontrollable reflex, my new brain trying to recircuit itself along the nerve passages for defiance and idealism. The doctor claims there isn't any cure, so I'm going to have to learn to cope with it now. This is titled, Whoever Said to Praise Only? And my wife and I took classes in Hunchback German when we lived in Germany, and we learned how to fill out forms for becoming a welder or something. And so it wasn't always the most practical German, or it was very practical German. What am I talking about? But it was not good for philosophical discourse in any way. And everyone who was in there was from all over the world. And in order to remain in Germany, they had to be in these classes pretending to learn German. And literally they were from Vietnam, and they were from Turkey, and they were from the former Soviet Union, and Portugal, and so on and so forth. And really a lot of the people, and lots of people from the Balkans, all of whom had recently been at war with each other. And of course, we'd been at war with a few of the people there as well. And so it was often a little awkward in there, but our teacher had seen it all. I mean, she just would sigh, Frau, gosh, I can't think of her name. It'll come to me in a week or two. I'll remember it. But this is a moment from that class. Whoever said to praise only? Whoever said to praise only our plentiful fields, our prodigious wealth, the sumptuous ease and grace of the body? Whoever said, lament what's barren, was a liar and a goddamn fool. Out of circulation now, we're like the coins we brought with us that don't regenerate, no matter how hard we strike one coin against the other. Ours is the smallest plot left, and trespassers all, our loyalties hang limp as tribal banners, minus the dignity of wind. We're just pretending we don't hate each other because of all the wars. Our lamentations a comic enmity if it weren't for the knives. We roll our eyes, and this is true. One night we had a student teacher who thought it'd be cool to teach everybody all the words for fruit and vegetables. And so she brought all these fruits and vegetables, and she brought sharp knives. And immediately all the men started looking at each other and sharpening the knives. And it's just like, oh, man, what is going on? Yeah. Where was I? As I was saying, if it weren't for the knives, we roll our eyes mocking the legendary harvests of enemies, 7 times 7 years of bounty in the duchy of once upon a time. Then wobble around like big wooden pigs, trying to accomplish the simplest task, learning how to form the interrogative by inverting our loud, assertive pride, as the one may better lead the other away, stunned and stumbling from the accidents of our aggrieved histories we're prone to. How old you? Vodka drink? Children have? Why come you here? How long here stay for? Such clumsy Congress, praising only the meanest fist of flaxseed drought forces us to hold back, praising not the reunion, but the long absence, the fallow, not the open furrow. It's all ours. 1 hectare of blackened potatoes, smutty field corn, a half peck of mushy sugar beets. Whatever we glean from it, we'll either learn to share it now or starve. Those poor guys. This is a poem I have never read in public. We lived on a street called Lordsingstrasse, and all the streets, they were all, concrete apartment blocks circa 1947. Little moldy inside, but basically okay. And all the streets had names like, Bachstrasse, Beethovenstrasse, Brucknerstrasse, Mozartstrasse. And then our street was Lordsingstrasse. And it was like, oh man, Lordsing, who's Lordsing? And I finally found out he was, by mailing a letter, this is the value of mail in the old sense, there was this big, round, curly-haired man. He says, "Oh, Lortzing," and he starts in speaking to me in German, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, Lortzing." And but I gleaned from this that he was the author of comic operas, but they were kind of nationalist comic operas, making fun, particularly of Russians, as you'll see. And so on Lortzingstrasse, I envy the postman who stands on one pedal, gliding down the sidewalks, delivering his route from one block of flats to the next. He brakes, hops off his bicycle, and jogs to a halt. That's good style. But there's substance here too, because from yellow panniers emblazoned with a hunting horn, he lifts letters posted in the provinces where pupils once studied penmanship and retirees, fatting themselves and sweating it off at spas, still write in a cursive that's as oblivious to the deliquescence of old friends as the letter writers are clueless that anxious semi-literate guest workers occupy the old flats, fearing perhaps there's been a mistake, a visa revoked. So I envy the postman, his mercy, his bell, his snappy, albeit drunken salutes, and how confident he is no one will discover where he stashes those elegant missives in the privet, between empty beer bottles and bird nests, a sacrifice to what goes astray. I've gone astray, opening these envelopes and promising to read all the gossip to ill-tempered songbirds, the local pronunciation of whose names causes me endless trouble, but who promised me in return, we'll make a party. If I bring millet, sunflower seeds, a ball of suet, and a bowl of sparkling water, they'll bring the grippa and a lot of mocking old songs. Let me join in the merriment I cause, stumbling over my out-of-kilter sentences and off-key grace notes, laughing at myself being laughed at, as in comic opera, because I'm the rube, like Peter the Great, wandering in more civilized nations, unsure what's really going on or exactly what is so goddamn funny. I'm sure all of you are aware of the fact that there's a great deal of crazy in our country at the moment. And and we've endured a lot of, and what about that Kenyon's birth certificate? Where is it? And so on and so forth. But in a way, I suppose it's kind of our just desserts, because you recall 2005, although there may have been reason to have been a little more concerned about the ship of state, people were paranoid, and I remember getting letters from people that were so full of catastrophe and subterfuge, and our letters are being read. We can't write on the internet. I don't know how we'll communicate. And so I was trying to write about that, and it was a very wordy poem. And I was like, how can I possibly rewrite this? And I thought, well, I'll just scratch I just randomly said, well, maybe every third word I'll just scratch out and see what happens. And I did it with a black marker, and it looked like, one of those CIA documents, and I was like, oh yeah, I got it. So this is called My Nationality, Redacted. She writes every blank, return blank altered, but always the same blank inside, hinting of blank, of catastrophe, the necessity to blank. Reading blank, I'm as confused as when I started to blank the marriage in my head, rehearsing, coaxing my dear reluctant blank, my ferocious blank, 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 stumbling blank in the soggy blank and boiled cabbage. I walk back to the flat to blank a tonic of the actual, half timbers blanked in bull's blood, the walls blanking like bellows, blank houses more blank than the blanks whose faces peered through lace blanking from carved lintels. What's the half-life of the blank for loyalty? Is it twice that of the isotope for blank? She didn't blank her passport either, and I can't blank it anymore. Whether it's blank come hither or is she feeling blank? My blank Tsarina, my haggard blank, if her daughter's blank in the beds of blank, who the hell's to blame for that? Every blank benumbed, elated, and blank. Oh, my dispirited blank, full of blank for our imperiled blank. Please don't blank away from me now. Blank me, baby, here in front of the blank. Remind me whose blank played what blank by Domenico blank, well enough to blank the blank and win medal for third blank. Okay. I was really worried about my country. I was like, oh my God. And it's not like we were doing anything to make it any easier, you know. This is called In the Space of an Hour. Sunday dawn, as I pulled open the blinds, a man stands across the courtyard 3 flights up in the opposite block of flats. He's thrown open metal shutters, bends over a pot, and scrubs at rings of scorched mush he left to soak overnight. On the concrete sill, he's placed a yellow bottle of cleanser with a green cap, the sign by which I know, waving hello, it's scented with artificial citron to mask the stale odor of last night's goulash in a kitchen as cold as my own. Ice fog interposes itself between us. Nothing and no one else has stirred. Pigeons keep to perches under eaves. The bakery van hasn't arrived, nor the first bus lumbered roly-poly to the corner, pausing with a fumy, apologetic sigh. What calls us forth is not triumphant. It is not the tigress on TV batting aside her cubs to lower her face first into the ribs of the roebuck. It is not a benzene-poisoned river. It is not a pit of charred swine, nor a child's bronchial cough. We live no larger than the distance we can walk in an hour, whispering a vow to shop windows, I will persist. And with any luck, will not board one of the trains that collide, nor cross the bridge destined to collapse, but will go on, immersed in the lexicon of the local and all it secures. I may not see my neighbor through the fog, but I trust he's up there, going at it still, really scrubbing, pausing only to tip the pot toward the light, as though to inquire higher up where they're better able to judge. This is a poem called Crossing Synagogenplatz. And on Kristallnacht in November of 1938. So basically, you know, all the synagogues got burned down in Germany, and in the little town where we lived, too. And it was pretty much ignored for, gosh, I don't know how long. But sometime in the late 90s, someone got a scruple of memory about it, and they made an interesting memorial to it, real common in German towns, a memorial to the Jews who once lived there. And And so this is where it takes place. It takes place in the memorial. But the memorial happened to be a shortcut to the station. And so everyone used it as a shortcut. And I think the only other thing in here that might, there's a tradition of leaving a stone on a gravestone when you visit it. But I think the rest of it is fairly straightforward. Crossing Synagogenplatz, 10 November 2005. Long after time scrapped its train, the train we're on glides underground, the engineer applying brakes. So we ease forward in our seats, who always sped into the future, losing momentum now. At every halt, boredom disgorges passengers, plenty enough of it for all of us to have grown weary of the commute, from main station to the end of the line. The stairwells venting stale air, the sticky handrails and depleted hope, all of it, all of us, past and future, emerge from a chrysalis of diesel fumes and scatter down a dozen streets leading away from the center, where those long dead broke the glass and set fire that obliterated God. Refrain ye, the Zohar advises, from seeking for the thing that is hidden from thee. What's hidden in the folly of blocks of stone recovered from ruin. 10 lindens planted in honor of words that called splendors from the void, vessels ablaze with the radiance of the mind. See ye any manner of similitude? Please, dearest one, don't let them see you cry. If you need to cry, cry only later. Otherwise, you'll never find your way to the end of this. Here be sorrows numberless as those complicit with the crime, drifting below us in layers no one should disturb again. The glory this world emerged from, inhabited by an absence grown so ordinary, we take a shortcut through the center of it, in transit to and from work, leaving tributes of gravel on the gravestone of God. All right, where am I? I'm making this up as I go along. I had a very clever plan here that made sense to try to follow the arc of this book. Let's just see. How are we doing for time? Okay. Let's jump ahead to this. This is a poem on page 45 called High Diver. It's the girl from upstairs again. Same apology. Sorry, sister not come. But what would you expect? Her nation never could afford to support its athletes, much less bribe international judges. So even the sound of her fist seems more like apology than summons. You wouldn't suspect someone was even knocking, though it stirs you every morning from commode to fisheye. A trench coat holding an infant like an offering passed into shadows behind your neighbor's door. Scan the columns of the scheduled tape beside the peephole. Glance at the time. She missed the 5:11 to the tool and die. She'll miss the 5:37 express. If her own people still exist on this planet, they live, if we can call it that, centuries ago. And therefore, Mrs. Warshenko is as close to kinswoman as that girl can hope to find. A well-oiled equation. The widow's door clinks shut. You go on squinting at the girl who's reluctant to leave now, lifting herself up and down on tiptoes as though she's about to execute a reverse 3.5 into the stairwell, screwing up courage and poise for that daring technical dive, a high degree of difficulty, and stunning if she can pull it off. Really nail it, the former champions whisper inside their soundproof booth. And we have many trials throughout this book, but as it progresses, it brings us back toward some kind of hope, I guess. That would be the most positive rating we could find, but not just yet. Well, maybe now. There's a glimmer. It's called How Winter Ends. This takes place sort of in Vilnius, and in Vilnius it is a very strange place, an interesting, nice place. Everyone looks like me. I'm just like, oh, I like it here. Everyone's tall, and it's like look at these people. They're well dressed. They're really swanky, but there were clearly in terms of Jewish Vilnius, there were lots of things there, but there was a very nice, well-supported museum, but it was always closed, so we never went in. And instead, we went into this just ghastly place, and we couldn't find it. And we look and look and look and look, and then you step through a door and another world opens, and you're like, oh, it's one of these. But but it was really strange because there were Axelrods and Gordons, even my wife's family, the Varons were there. What were those Mediterranean people doing in Vilnius, for God's sake? Taking music classes with Jascha Heifetz. I was like, the world has changed, We're in La Grande now. So, How Winter Ends. You're searching lists of surnames of the lost, as though among those euphonious compounds and indigenous-sounding hybrids, you could discover a cure for what coarsens and corrupts you. The little hunchback in the mink coat interrupts because she's seen this all before, closes the chronicles, groans as she lifts and carries it across the sagging floors to its chain inside the safe that survived the worst. You drift back separately through the passage with its leaky plumbing and falling plaster to the door where you rang. She answered, and, blocking your way, thanks you now for the donation you haven't made. And weren't you just about to leave? In the photo you showed her of Dora, the auntie with the withered leg who nobody married, poses, if such a word is even permissible, in an archway, a blurry acid mark of a short life that others reasoned mattered less than yours. And so they left her behind to watch the flat until someone sent for her. Twilight and coal ash falling on snow in the courtyard below. Those faces watching behind lace wonder who you are. In the archway to the street, the chill of rotten leaves, urine of feral cats, stone stained by a crust of salt, the high water mark of time drawn on the wall by chalk in a child's hand, an equation spray painted just above it in universal glyphs, cock plus cunt equals question mark. The bells empty, cold iron 18 times over the derelict city, Jerusalem of the North, and in the silence that follows, a fugitive song, an invisible bird answering from its perch in a tree near an ice-bound curb. 2 ascending notes, and a long liquid trill. I'm going to choke here. So I tried to get the page designer anyway to actually do the graffiti, but she would not respond to my encouragement. I remember years ago, oh, this is a ridiculous story. I better not tell that story. I better move on. No, I can't. I mean, it's too vulgar. It's vulgar. It's inappropriate for a public setting like this. The library is a gift to this fine city. And no reason to bring that up, even though I did. Song of the Earth. Our hostess never mentioned a cosmonaut. And I never would have suspected it if, after dinner, he hadn't leaned back in his chair, his hairy forearms on the table. Almuth had just served Blackberry Cobbler, and Vasily sighed with such grief he sounded like a conscript posted to a border crossing 10,000 leagues from the capital. This, too, he said, this I ate on Soyez. It possessed the texture of, how say you, styrofoam? Imagine that. Gliding in the solitude of his capsule in space, and a nostalgic dietitian thought to send along blackberry-flavored styrofoam. What exhilarating sorrows! You glance back, and sometimes the earth's not even there below, not the curve of the high latitudes, nor the bulge at the equator, just a void. And then the nausea of that illusion, gravity having let go entirely, so that you wobble out of orbit, a wanderer in the vertigo of infinity. And then retro rockets fire. And truly Promethean, you puncture the sky, returning in a skin of superheated plasma. You may explode, and there's nothing so fascinating to watch as that catastrophic trail of your debris strung across the blue, an illusion of weightlessness, the crashing to Earth. Yes, Cobbler really is something to miss out there. Thorns tearing at your wrists, the thin skins of the ripe fruit, a transitory state of being. Neither membrane nor liquid, touch it and it bursts. Communion, Blackberry Cobbler, the brown sugar, butter, flour, soda, and salt, especially the salt. Salt dripping from your brow, salt of terrors, salt reddening your eyes and temper. Sitting there, earthbound, belly full, sweating, and pounding back another glass of Amur vodka, Vasily seemed a traveler still, returned from the far places of the frontier, a rare disease incubating in his lungs. "They're good, yeah?" I said, my mouth full. He grunted, picking the seeds from between his teeth. So I'm just going to read one or two more at the most, and then I will shut up. I'm not going to read from the last section of this book because it's a choral poem. And my dream is someday to have a room full of, like a chorus, and have them do it, you know, and they just eliminate me altogether. And the chorus, there's a cantor, there's a man, there's a woman. It's very, very exciting and very hopeful. For a poem that posits a theory of language. It's better than it sounds, yeah. This is called the Kebab Stand. You can buy kebabs in downtown Portland, right? There's a little Turkish place there, there's kebabs, right? Authentic kebabs, right? That's right, exactly.
It's where?
It's on 3rd, maybe? I think 3rd near Morrison, not far from where the octopus used to be, the purple octopus, I've never gone in there, because, the kebabs are made out of typically like 11-year-old frozen chicken or something. They're not, but sometimes you have to have one. And so the city seemed, as cities sometimes will, empty, as though suddenly abandoned to contagions, militias approaching across plains. No taxis, not even a stray dog. Just trackless snow, rows of plane trees and dark facades. So we walked, burdened by something unwieldy as a 55-gallon drum, and kept trying to shift its weight, hold it in our arms 1 block to the arsenal, put it down to rest, then lifting and trying to steady it again. We turned at the state archives and passed through a damp tunnel, the shortcut to an arcade where light streamed from a shop at the far end, music throbbing through steamy glass. As we pushed the door open and shook off snow, an earnest man took a piece of flatbread from the oven and assembled in the palm of his hand slices of lamb. It wasn't lamb, let me tell you. I might as well admit it was that repulsive stuff that I was just talking about. Shredded leeks and red cabbage, a dollop of yogurt, a spoonful of pepper sauce, and then folded it, cut it in two, and held out a half to each of us. For a few coins, we could join all the others eating where we stood in the crowded room, bumping into one another. While on a TV, high in a corner of the ceiling, a woman sang beside a balustrade along the Bosporus, whirling to the beat of drums until she became a flame rising into the air. And all eyes were staring, so happy everyone in that crowd at that moment was, to confirm our conviction that this is the only world, where the weight of desolation in its streets that night could not obliterate what is necessary and beautiful as a woman and a song. And even as she ended, we cheered her because, after all, we were spellbound and knew we were nowhere near the end of it yet. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you. You've been very kind and patient. Thank you for coming tonight. And Tom said, if I were a good sport, I would take any questions you might have. And I'm here to tell you that I'm willing to be a good sport. And if you have any questions, and if you don't, that's perfectly legit. Yes.
Thank you very much, David.
Oh, yes. What? I thought you were excusing me, and I was like, oh, good. I'm at the door. I'm at the door.
I ask people to talk about their writing practice. What's your writing practice? Your writing discipline? When do you write?
It's changed, I guess. My children are grown and out of the house, and it occurred to me about, maybe almost 2 years ago in June, that I did not have to get up at 4:30 every morning anymore. And my children weren't coming back, and if they did, they would sleep in. I wouldn't disturb them. So I could get up anytime I liked. I could actually not be sleep deprived and grouchy all the time. And so I pretty much write anytime during the day when I have a chance to sit down and write, and feel, they need to do so. And as for the rest of it, it's a mystery, and I could not shed any light on giving advice to anyone because I am like a blind man in a dark, alone, and finding my way with everything I write. Many, many drafts and so on. So, yeah. You had a question, yes?
I have two questions. What took you to Germany and what brought you to LeGrand?
Well, the story about what brought me to LeGrand is a lot more interesting than about the story about Germany. living in the United States in 2004 and 5 was making me sick. And I was glad for an opportunity to leave. And I kind of felt pretty good. Then I came back, and then I got really sick. And I've gotten a lot better since. That's the short answer. The other one, what brings us to LeGrand, one day when we were living in Montana, maybe like 1982, I cut my toe off cutting kindling for the wood stove. And at the moment I did that, I had been thinking about possible places I could find a job in the West where there were mountains, it was rural, and it was, what I thought that would be the ideal world. And I was thinking about LeGrand at that very moment. I mean, there's a place called Strawberry Mountains, and there was this weird place called Wallow. I couldn't say it, and oh, that sounds interesting. And there's a little school there, The doctor put it back on. Put it back on. But this is the real story, is that a friend came over with marijuana brownies after I did this. So I didn't take my boot off because I was a tough guy. And my boot was filling with blood. But I ate one of these, and I just sort of went into total shock. I looked at it and I go, oh my God. And they finally rushed me off to the hospital to get my toe sewn on. Yeah. But that's how I ended up in LeGrand. Hapless, it's hapless as ever. It's almost as hapless as my writing, how I write. Yes?
I'm sure this is going to elicit another story. Count on it. How did your writing change from living abroad after you came back here? Did you notice a change in the way you saw the world?
Yeah, sure. I think with Cartographer's Melancholy, things started to change. Back in the late 1990s, early 2000s. Because it wasn't just traveling in Germany, we were traveling all over and trying to turn our children into human beings and so largely succeeding, I might add. And I think even though a lot of this stuff seems very narrative, there's a tremendous amount of density of stuff that comes into poems now to the point where you almost can't see through them. They're so dense with things and objects and places and layers of things. And one of the things that I kind of am pondering in the last part of this book is, even though it's completely off the radar, you won't see this, but is how do you come back to a place that likes to imagine itself as a kind of Eden and see the world with the same depth as you see it in places you're not familiar with? And that's kind of where things are now. So there you go. So it did change. I used to be tried to write really limpid poems. And, they're awful. Anything else? It is hotter than anything in here. Shall we just... Yes, question. The poet laureate has a question.
If you would read the Chagall poem for us, or do you have another one for you?
I was going to read that, but I thought that I was just,
Please.
I was overstaying my welcome.
No.
Okay, and you don't want to get into that trouble. We're all beautiful as sky. And you know where that comes from? That is a poem, it's the first line of a poem by Walt Whitman. Yeah. And called Reconciliation. And it's about the end of the Civil War. Word over all, beautiful as sky. The tall doors I thought bolted gave way and swung with such well-oiled ease, I lurched forward a step and, stunned, breathed a blue mild as the arms that held the infant Tobias. A blue that glows at the core of silver, blue of comets at the zenith, blue glint of armor angels wear on errands to earth. In no way I could conceive of was that blue a lie, a pretty delusion, a hoped-for answer to the question that we keep asking, empty space that never says anything in reply. It was the divine itself, though I believe in no such thing besides the necessity of it, struggling towards us through the layers, returning from its exile in the absolute zero of the void. What is possible, always asserting its fidelity to this world, full to its brim with sorrows. There, high on the walls of chancel and nave, twice reduced to ruins by war, the blue of reconciliation, word over all, beautiful as sky. Blue, a man no God conceived of in the final year of his life, an old man full to the brim with praise, despite the farce that deformed entire peoples and scattered us like pieces of broken bell. That man, even as he fell into oblivion, fell without a trace of regret, this radiance pouring from his mind. Blue, we know, isn't suitable for shelter, isn't an angel bearing good tidings to earth, nor armor that can protect a mother or child. It's our predicament, right? So thank you very much.